Hey guys, you're watching the Best Practices Show, where we take a look at the best business practices from the best dental practices all across the country. And some of you are looking for that path in which you want to do high quality restorative dentistry. And I've got some secrets for that path. Good friend of mine, Dr. Zach Sisler. You don't want to miss this. So do me a favor, grab a pen and hit the share button. We'll see you in a second. Hey guys, welcome back to the Best Practices Show. We are having so much fun doing this, and thank you again for watching. Love the comments and love the questions and some of the things that you guys want to see, and today is no exception. So a lot of you looking for some great answers as you go down to the path of great restorative dentistry, and question marks come up all the time. Which direction do I go? And so I've got a good friend of mine who I'm watching is a rising star in restorative dentistry, and you'll see why here in just a second, with some great insight. Now, before we get started, just a couple show notes. We are shooting this live on Facebook. And so if you have questions during the live feed, please ask questions, because we want to know what you're thinking, and I'll make sure that I give the questions directly to Zach, and you'll see we'll get you the right answers. Or if you're watching this later on, feel free to add the questions to the feed, and we'll make sure we get back to you, and because we want to make sure you get the most out of this. Now, my guest today, let me tell you just a little bit of background. So I've watched this kid, and in just little forums, and just, I think the first time I met you, we went out to dinner, and I had a chance to meet you. I'm like, I like this kid. And then you came to the seminar, and then I've been watching you here and there. And then I went to the Dawson Academy alumni retreat, and I'm like, there's my buddy. And then, sure enough, you're like presenting, you won the whole study club. You can explain what that whole thing was, but you won the whole, I was like, that's awesome. And I just love the way you think. I love that you're authentic and you're on this path. You're a young dentist, you're 32. And we're going to talk about this path in the road less traveled, because a lot of people don't often pick a tougher path. They'll pick the easy path. So Zach, I know, you're just getting started with your whole speaking thing, and I'm telling you, you're going to be one of the stars. But who, if people don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about your story? Like, who are you and where do you practice?
All right, thanks for the kind introduction. And since I am a kid, I did have to grow this facial hair to prevent the patients from getting whiplash and stuff when I walk in the room. But no, my name's Zach Sisler. I practice in a small town in central Pennsylvania called Shippensburg. It's a tiny town, probably about 6,000 people. Mm-hmm. So it's fairly rural from that standpoint. I have a wife and 2 kids with a kid on the way. My kids are 2 and 4, and 1 due in September. So my wife is also a major supporting role in this whole thing that we call practice in life. But with that, yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell. So.
Yeah. That's awesome. Now, I want you to, one of the things that you and I talked about before we went live is just, this whole thing when you purchased a practice from a great dentist. And now when you turn it, you've got to make it your own. It's got to be your values, your vision, your philosophy. Can you give some perspective on that? Because you've done a marvelous job, but that's not an easy thing to do.
I took over practice. The previous general dentist was a great guy, and his patients absolutely loved and adored him. And it was a really smooth transition. We both thought it went well. I have a little different look at things and how I wanted to transition things from a cosmetic standpoint. And so we were showing the staff what could be achieved and what we were hoping to do and trying to get them on board. And it was different for them too, but ultimately, they saw as the cases began to unfold that, the joy we were providing a lot of patients and how you really could truly change a patient's life. I used to kind of think that was corny when people said that, oh, we can change a life. But truly, with some of these cases, you can. And for a lot of our patients, we began to see that. And, for me being a young person in a small town with somewhat of an older patient population, that took some hard knocks as well. I mean, we were trying to just basically get our samples out there so that people could see it, and then the floodgates started coming in. It's been a lot of fun, I mean, and seeing a lot of this stuff transition, but it's also been fun for my staff and to watch them transition as well. So ultimately, it's been a challenge, but we're kind of under the positive mindset that we're going to push through this, and whatever it takes at all costs. And, I didn't move my family to Little Central Pennsylvania to not have something work, Yeah. But
yeah. And talk about that transition, because that wasn't easy for your family, but you were working in another practice, right? And then how did you get to the Dawson Academy? What was the motivation? What happened?
So when I came out of school, I was an associate in a group practice in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And it was a great experience. And I worked with 2 other docs, and it was very fast paced, and it was a PPO driven practice. And, I was building up speed and learning the business aspect of things. And it was a very, very good experience. But I just felt like there was something missing. Like I was looking for something more, maybe a little more satisfaction with work and with results and certain things like that. So I had a professor one time in dental school tell me, you should probably go to the Dawson Academy or at least explore that option. And I said, well, okay. So I went down, and, my story is very similar to probably a lot of people that talked about Dr. Peter Dawson, and that it only took a couple of hours before you were like just drawn into him, and just basically say, tell me what I've got to do and I'll do it. Because I mean, he's captivating. And then when I went back to my PPO practice and I started implementing some of it, I had some quick success, and people were getting results with equilibrations and with other things and relieving pain and from muscular problems. But I just realized that it was going to be a big challenge because the 2 guys that I was practicing with, it was just a different mentality. And not that there's anything wrong at all with their mentality. They just like to be the real busy, fast-paced. And I was hoping to slow things down a little bit, almost, how do I describe it? Like almost push the pause button or the slow motion button in a way. Okay. Yeah. Because it was moving at lightning speed, and I just felt like I wasn't being able to be as comprehensive as what I wanted to. So that's when I started looking for practice, and I told my wife, look, I'm hoping to go down this path. I know it's going to be a journey. I know it's going to be a challenge, but I'm just asking you, please come with me on it. And she was totally supportive, which makes this a whole lot easier.
Oh yeah.
But we had just moved into a brand new house that we had built and only been living there probably 2 months, 3 months maybe. And then I go down and hear Dr. Peter Dawson, and he changes my life. So it's a challenge, but ultimately we're trying to find the positive in it. And, I'm originally from West Virginia. So when we started looking at practices, we actually ended up a little bit closer to West Virginia. So it made it easier from being able to go back and visit family standpoint, and actually got us kind of a little closer to what we were used to. Harrisburg's a fairly big city, but Shippensburg's a whole lot smaller. And so we were used to the little bit more slow, relaxed kind of country life. And we really enjoyed it. And we don't regret it a bit. There are sometimes we still sit back and wonder like how we ended up here. But I know my journey at the Dawson Academy started that process, and now we're in the process of trying to live out that journey and finish it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool. That's so cool. Now, and when we talk about the road less traveled, it's not good, bad, or indifferent. I just want to say this, because if you're watching this, we certainly don't want anybody to feel like there's a certain path. The cool part about this profession is that when you learn a lot, you can actually choose how you want to practice. You shared with me before the call, your whole team, you guys are going to go 7 to 3, and you're going to watch your kids grow up and do all that stuff. And you were a little nervous, and your team's like, game on. What did they say to you? They said,
you pick the day and we'll make it happen. I said, okay.
And that's for everybody's benefit. It's for your patient's benefit. It's for your benefit. It's for everybody. And really, the people I'm happy most for are your family, because it's just going to give you a whole nother day after your day is done. But here's the point. I guess this is the point. There's a lot of paths to choose, and people say you can't have it all sometimes. And the truth of it is you can, but you got to work hard at this, and it's not about creating an insurance free, exclusive practice either. Because can you just give us a little perspective on Shippensburg's great town, but it's not like a high rise community, maybe like, a little Manhattan where people are just walking around super have a lot of discretionary dollars for dentistry, do they?
No, not at all. And not in the least. And that's kind of what, I try to tell a lot of my colleagues and a lot of friends of mine, and just say I don't have people walking in with open checkbooks.
Right.
It's not as if, just because we, are considered out of network for most insurances that we just completely discard that. No, I still have a general practice. I'm still have a hygiene department, and I still am seeing kids and simple restorative procedures. But we tend to focus on a higher end cosmetic path as well. And for the people who say, well, you can't do that in a small town, or you can't do that, you're just going to have to, live by the way the insurances tell you to live. And, that's just, for us, that just wasn't how we wanted to proceed with it. We wanted to look at the bright side and say, look, no, we can help these patients. And there are some times where the dental insurance is going to come into play and it's going to help them out. And then there's going to be other times where maybe it isn't. But that doesn't mean I'm going to discard it altogether. It doesn't mean that I'm just going to abandon everything and say, oh, no, well, if you have insurance, we're not seeing you. No, not at all. Mm-hmm. We're still going to see those patients. We're still going to put them in the hygiene department. We're still going to love on them and show them how we're different. And then hopefully we can transition them over to maybe more of a comprehensive model if that's what they're wanting.
Right.
So.
Right. And, I mentioned this to you. When I saw you present, one of the things I love so much is you didn't have ideal conditions. You had a wonderful patient, and you just put all the pieces of the puzzle together. It wasn't necessarily the perfect time frame, but it was so cool how you honored the patient. The aesthetic result was mind-blowing. You do some gorgeous stuff, but you said, hey, look, here's the deal. I'm basically helping each patient with where they're at, and we put it all together in the best optimal result. It's never perfect. It's more optimal and predictable, don't you think?
Yeah. And it's kind of we're playing the hand we've been dealt.
Right.
I think ideal, when I tell patients, I say, look, we treatment plan the ideal.
Yeah.
I'm trying to show you the goal of where we're headed. But there are very, very, very few situations that are perfectly ideal, and that I can even make perfectly ideal. So we're going to play this hand we've been dealt. We're going to make the most of the situation. And if that means this case for you is going to take over 3 or 4 years to complete, then we'll get there. It's not always got to be everything all at once. Right. And honestly, in our patient population and in our practice, we find ourselves phasing treatment more and more. And I think that's one thing that the Dawson Academy will help you learn. But I also think it's one thing that you're going to have to learn to be good at in this current mindset of the patient, where they're coming in and they might think they want it all right off the bat, but then when they start to really analyze and look at finances and look at other things, they say, oh, I can't do that. Well, I'll tell you what, let's see how we can help you get there.
Right.
Okay. And it might be utilizing your insurance so much for every year that you get it. Or it might be, well, we do a little bit this year and we do a little bit next year. And we've been able to kind of help patients out that way more so. And then that keeps them, it keeps them from having to go through maybe a care credit or maybe a home equity loan or something like that. It kind of helps them break it up and just take bites that they can afford at that time. Right. I think if anybody would go back and just assume that all of a sudden they're going to start practicing this way and that they're not going to be able to break things out for patients, I think that's maybe a foolish way to look at it. Mm-hmm. I think you're going to have to find alternatives or find solutions to problems, whether they be monetarily or whether they be treatment or whether they be emotionally. We talk a lot about with patients that, if this isn't the right time for you, whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally, we can push this off, or we can get you stable until you are ready for it. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people also focus more so just on the monetary aspect of it. Oh, It's money. No, it's not. It's not. I mean, this is going to be a big investment for some people from a mental standpoint of coming and sitting in the chair for how many hours, or for the emotional appeal for the patient who has been a little shy with their smile their whole life, or they're not confident about it. And then you go and drastically change somebody's life like that. That can be some big emotions displayed. So I think you've got to be able to learn to solve those solutions as they arise, but also realizing that you're treatment planning to ideals, but you're treating reality. Okay. You know, and reality is that it's not always going to be ideal, and there's always going to be a compromise here or there, but are you and the patient willing to live with that compromise?
Right.
If they are, I'm willing to live with it. So.
Yeah, and I want you to speak to that, because sometimes when we talk about phasing treatment, that's really something that needs further definition, and which elements you compromise. And you're pretty strong in your philosophy. I mean, you're 32 years. I would kill to be 32 again. You know, I don't know what I'd do if I was 32 again. But like, it's so cool to listen to you, because you are going to compromise some elements, but you're not going to compromise ultimately doing the right thing. And that's part of what this path is all about. So can you just define what phasing treatment is? Because there are some people that just want us all to kind of to clarify that.
Well, and I think in our office, phasing treatment means helping you achieve the result that you're wanting, just biting it off in smaller increments. Right. So that might be the traditional treatment planning of, well, we're going to treat the bacterial end of the spectrum first, and then we're going to come into a functional component. For some other people, it might be they've got a large functional component. Like that case I showed at the Dawson Academy Study Club retreat. You know, the patient came in and she wasn't ready to do a full mouth rehabilitation. Right. The compromise there was, I can do it in smaller increments. You're just going to have to live with the fact that the shades and that the aesthetics aren't quite there yet. And it's going to be over the course of a couple of years that you might have some mismatching shades in your mouth. She was at peace with that. So if she's at peace with it, I'm at peace with it. Right. Ultimately, it took a while. We got it done. We achieved stability from a functional standpoint first. She was able to test ride provisional. She was able to test ride composites, other minimally invasive dentistry, and then we could transition her into veneers and crowns and things of that nature. But I think as long as you're achieving stability at those increments and keeping somebody stable, it allows you to get to that point. Right. If that makes sense. You know, like it's, how do I want to say that? It's, for the person who it seems such a daunting task to do it all at once. If you're able to break it down and show them your capabilities and to gain their confidence, then I feel like they're going to continue on with treatment and just continue it through the phasing. Does that make sense?
Yep, does. Okay. And the other thing that I'm noticing is, if you watch this whole process, some of these cases take a very long time, and you're establishing huge levels of trust by just going slow and doing the right thing. And so over time, it compounds into a result that you could never even imagine. You are changing people's lives. You know, you've changed their self-esteem. It's a good chance these people are going to even live longer because of the work that you've done together. And, you know, me being a younger person as well, I mean, like, it's not easy. I mean, a lot of people, me myself, I would sometimes think it would be easier if I had a few more gray hairs and, you know, like a gray or no hair at all.
Or no hair at all, just like yourself. But no, because a lot of people do come in and look at me at my age and say, like, oh, I don't know, he's young. I don't, you know, does he have the experience that we need to? So by phasing it and kind of allowing the chips fall where they may, or to allow it to unfold in front of them, it gives them the confidence in you that, hey, okay, he's done it thus far. It's proving stable. It's not breaking down, and I'm going to keep on going. Because, you know, gaining a lot of these patients' trust when you're proposing treatment that could take over a year, I mean, you've got to get that trust in the beginning stages. Otherwise, I don't think you'll ever make it to the end stages. Right. So, yeah. And arguably, I mean, you probably have 3 more decades of practice in front of you. And I just look at this as just an amazing foundation for what's ahead of you. But I do want to ask you, I'm going to ask you some tough questions though, too, because it's not like you deal with resistance all the time.
Do you know, whether it be your own resistance, maybe some things from your team? What do you do at such a young age that keeps you focused on moving down this road that you just don't get discouraged? Like, give us a couple insights. What do you do personally that keeps you on that path?
One thing particularly with patients is that I would say, it's my job to explain their problems to them.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't necessarily give them the condition.
Right.
But I'm hoping to explain the solutions that I have for them. Mm-hmm. If they're not ready for that at that point, I'm at peace with that. And I'll tell them, like, if you're not ready, I'm at peace with that because I've at least given you the opportunity. If you came back to me 10 years from now and you asked what we were to do and we didn't have, and I said, well, I should have seen you 10 years ago. They're like, well, I've been sitting here the whole time. What have you been doing? Yeah. I said, I think you would have a right to be mad. I said, but I realize that sometimes not everybody is going to be ready to jump right on board with comprehensive dentistry or for aesthetics or whatever the case is. So with that, I'm hoping to point it out, keep them in the practice, love on them in the hygiene department, mm-hmm. let my staff love on them, prove that we're different, prove mm-hmm. that, we're worth sticking around here for. And then as they come around and as maybe they see like a few more people in the practice who have had some of the work we've had done, they can say, okay, now I'm ready. Now that I've kind of been able to see it unfold, I'm ready to do my smile, or I'm ready to proceed on. And mm-hmm. that's fine. I don't feel like to say that somebody's not going to do comprehensive dentistry, I'm going to discard them from my practice. No, I've still got a business to run too, and I've still got a practice to maintain and to keep my hygienist busy and things like that. So to say that I'm just going to discard people, no, I still think I'm here to help, and I still think I can help them. It's just a matter of then what capacity they're ready for me to help them. Yeah. So.
Absolutely. No.
And personally too, I learned this from you, and like keeping me clear and focused throughout the day and like focused on this goal is kind of taking care of myself a little bit. Mm-hmm. So getting up in the morning and working out, even though I don't want to do it and I hate doing it, I still get up in the morning and I work out, even if it's like a 15-minute cardio or a 10-minute cardio, whatever it is, because I just feel amped up and charged up. My mood is better. So when I come in and, you start having a few struggles in your day, but you've at least kind of shaken out the cobwebs and got the fog out, you feel more ready to handle it. And so that's been, honestly, and I thank you for that, because you're the ones who kind of burned it into my squash to do it. So, but it's been a major help.
Hey man, I'm just trying to figure this out like you, and you know how this is. When you take care of yourself in the morning, you could deal with more stress. You can deal with, when you put, your own stress in the body, the mind just follows. And and the other thing too, dentistry is inherently stressful, and you're heading down a path where it's going to be even more stressful, because the word shade, shape, translucency, margins, those mean completely different things to you as you start to age and mature. So that stress has to have compensation. So good job, buddy, man. You might practice for 4 more decades. Who knows?
I'm good at 3.
You're good at 3. Now, I want you to talk about the transition too, because when you take a patient base, you take a team and a practice, and moving it down this path, what are some of the things that you've learned for sure as you start to move in this direction? And any insight you'd give us on this road?
I think one of the biggest things is having the staff involved from the get-go. I mean, from the starting point, because when I came down and I took over this practice, I realized that they had the relationships with the patients that I didn't. Okay. I'm just a young face walking in the door that they don't know from anybody, but they know the staff, they know the hygienist, they know the front desk. So I realized very quickly I had to get them on my team. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so I started walking them through the process. I started showing them how I was going to do an exam, how I was going to treat it with photography and with other things. And it started to open up their eyes, and they started to see things. And so they were saying, I'll never forget, like the first time my one staff member came to me, I'd been here a couple of months, and they said, I'm already just seeing things differently than what I used to. And it's not bad, and it's not anything negative. It's just, I see things differently now just from what you kind of showed us with the photography and looking at pictures and looking back through the smile. And I said, that's the goal. That's what we're shooting for. I said, is to see things differently. And so by getting them on board and then doing some procedures on them, doing small little smile makeovers here, or doing Invisalign, or doing just even simple crowns, stuff like that, it allowed them to experience me as a practitioner, but also start to see how my views were unfolding. So for them, they're starting to feel it in their own mouth. That way, when I walk out of the room, they can look to the patient and say, hey, look, he did this for me. Like, I would fully and 100% agree with it. Like, you should do it. And they became basically kind of like almost like a cheerleader for me. I mean, and I needed that drastically because these people didn't know me. And so for me, getting the staff on board was absolutely crucial. And even to this point, today, they were talking and they said, we can sit down and pretty much start to begin to analyze a smile now. So when I walk out of the room, I've maybe told the patient the technicalities and, okay, this is probably what we're going to need to do. But then after they've dismissed the patient, they come back to me and they said, hey, look, I talked to them. This is why they want to do it, because they dive into the emotional and almost the relational side of it.
Right.
And so they've got that relationship. So it's easy for them to sometimes approach those topics easier than what it would be for me. The patient doesn't necessarily, it's not that they don't trust me. It's just that they don't know me well enough yet. Now that we've been in here about 4 and 5 years, I've developed some of those relationships, but it's been at the major help with my team. So getting them on board, and when I hear a lot of docs when I go to the courses at the Dawson Academy, they'll say, I just can't get my staff on board. And I said, well, have you tried to walk them through the process so that they could actually see it? And they'll say, well, no. I said, well, you've got to help them see it. You've got to help them see the vision in order for them to understand it, because as far as they see it, you're just coming back from another course with stuff you want to implement, and it's just making more work for them. But if you can help them understand why you're trying to implement it and how it's going to help your patients and how it's going to help them, I mean, it's kind of like a no-brainer, and they can just sit back and be like, well, yeah, okay, that seems logical. Let's go ahead and just do that. So, but that was one of the biggest critical components for me, taking over and doing the transition, just because, again, they didn't know me. And I would highly, highly recommend that for anybody who's transitioning in practice, but it's also, even if you've had staff a while and you're wanting to try to implement something new, they've got to be able to see it. They can't just read your mind that from everything you absorbed at the course that weekend. They're going to have to be able to kind of understand it, touch it, feel it, get into the moment to kind of really grasp it and what's going on. So.
Yeah. And you honestly, that's why I'm so proud of you. I just want to cheer when you're, I'm so crazy proud of you. But when you say you can't read your mind, if you're a dentist watching this late at night, let me give you a little hint. They can't read your mind. And even if they could, you wouldn't want them to. Okay. So that's a key piece here is you've got to communicate. Now, the other thing I would say, all too often in great restorative dentistry, when you go down the road less traveled, people talk about how you transform the life of a patient. And as you can see, if you're watching this, I mean, you're transforming the people that you work with so closely every day. You're transforming their lives in a way they can authentically. And that's a huge missed opportunity, because everywhere I go, people are asking for marketing. What's marketing? I'm like, these people around you are the best marketing you could ever. But they're like, oh, I don't want to spend any money. I don't know. I'm like, oh my gosh, invest. So I think that's fantastic. And truly, they're going to communicate a lot of times better than you are when it comes to where you're headed with your practice. Now, other pitfalls, as you've done this, you've run into other pitfalls. What are some of the other pitfalls that you've run into going down this path?
Let's think about that. I think one of the biggest pitfalls, I guess, I kind of took upon myself, and looking back, realizing after being on the other side of it a little bit, I can understand it better. And I think that's maybe patients not being as fully enthused as what you are about things.
Right.
Like you'll come back and you'll say, oh, I can help you. I can do all this stuff. I can fix your bite, and I can make your smile a whole lot better, and I can do all this. And, I kind of took it like emotionally when they said, nah, doc, I'm not interested.
Mm-hmm.
And initially I was like, well, no, but you don't understand. Like I can really help you. I can really do this.
Right.
And they're like, no, doc, I'm good. And so initially I took that as kind of like a hit, like, man, they just don't want my help. Like, how am I going to do this? I still got to pay my bills. I still got to do this, but I really want to do this functional aesthetic dentistry. And that's when I talked to John Cranham. He was one of the ones who told me, look, you still got to love on these people. You've got to develop the relationship. And I think part of my pitfall was on some of those, I was trying to rely on my relationship that I didn't have because they didn't know me. And looking back at it, I'm like, no, that's probably where I should have even relied more on my team rather than me try to force the issue. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of times when I've went in and I've tried to force the issue, it's backfired on me. And sometimes when I just allow the patients to kind of maybe either bring it up themselves or just ask the question, like, did you know this was here? That's when maybe more of their own light bulb goes off and they begin to ask me more about it rather than me try to give it to them if they don't really want it or they're not ready for it.
Right.
So I think that was one big pitfall. And then the other pitfall would be, even though I took over this practice in this tiny little town, mm-hmm. I kind of let some of the naysayers get at me a little bit and say, you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to do it. And at one point, maybe I thought I couldn't do it. And then I finally had a few people come in and we started getting going on it. And it just completely turned my view around. Like I think I'd had a few of those setbacks with the patients who were like, no, I'm not interested. And I'm like, oh man, maybe I'm not going to be able to make this work. How is this going to happen?
Right.
But we still had to kind of keep pushing through. And I think that's one of the hardest things to do, is because dentistry can be such an emotional battle some days, where, maybe you have dealt with some difficult people or you maybe even dealt with a difficult staff member. You don't know what you're walking into that day, but sometimes taking it too personal can be kind of a big pitfall. And I guess I would encourage people to not let that one little setback derail their whole vision, because it can be so good if you're willing to push through it. But if you just let the first little obstacle or the first little speed bump mess you up, like, it's a long road back from there, I guess. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very powerful too. You could use this almost in every sport, but you look at baseball, same thing. What really happens is you have a collection of really quick wins, or you get a little progress, a couple quick hits. You can see the whole confidence in not only the team but the whole stadium change. And the same thing happens in dentistry. If you just constantly have resistance and you don't have these quick, some simple little wins, they don't always have to be full mouth cases or anything, but just a few little that you go, hey, look, I can do this. They compound and it creates a lot more confidence on the path. Now, I got to ask you this question too. Our good friend Deepak, who asks great questions. He's awesome. Being 32, you mentioned having a certain style and protocol for presenting treatment. How will it change when you hit 42 or 52, if at all? So, good question.
One thing I think I've noticed that it's already happened, and I hope that would continue to happen, is I've simplified it for the patient. So
tell us more.
Initially,
what does that mean?
When I would initially present a treatment plan, I would almost spew too much information on them that they weren't ready for. And it almost was so bombarding that their mind was spinning and they couldn't handle it. Mm-hmm. And now we've tried to simplify it down. I do give every large case treatment like a keynote presentation, mm-hmm. with some photos of their case and photos of maybe cases that we've done that's similar to theirs. But in doing that, I found that, one, it keeps me from talking too much. Mm-hmm. Two, it simplifies it down because I can say, here's the issue, here's what we're going to do to fix it, here's the cost for that. Right. And I hope by the point, maybe when I'm 42 and I go to try to do this, maybe I won't even need the keynote. I'll just be able to say, here's what you need, and that's what we're going to do, and be done. Right. But I think, and you talk about this, and you're awesome when you talk about it, is that there's the curve of simple and complexity. And, things don't have to be complex to be understood. And a lot of times when we're presenting large comprehensive treatment or full mouth rehabilitations or full mouth implants, whatever the case is, we as dentists understand the intricacies and all the effort that's going to go into this and all the little nuances. Patient doesn't. Okay. So it's got to be simple in their terms to be able to understand it. And I think sometimes the more simple that I have been, the more quickly the patients have just been ready to say, yeah, I'm on board. Let's roll.
Right.
So hopefully by the time I get older, I'll, maybe I can ditch the keynote and just say, yep, this is what it is, and we'll fix it. But I don't know that they'll ever come that point. But hoping to refine and simplify that process will be better.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback on the same frame of this. I'm curious because you do a ton of CE, what you see in the future. What's a dentist who's 32 and on a great path? What do you let's say you and I get together in 2 years, 3 years. What do you think we're going to be seeing in complex restorative dentistry or on this path? We can only guess, but what do you see at your stage in this game?
It's a guess, but I think it's probably pretty much a given for the future, and the fact that digital is exploding right now.
Right.
So obviously I think with some of the full mouth reconstructions or with some of the high end aesthetics, there's going to be the push for more and more and more to be done digitally, to get away from impressions, to do it all virtually. And I think it's in the early stages. I mean, it's there. It's just needing people to refine it at this point. Right. And I think the one challenge for some of that is a lot of this digital dentistry takes big dollars, investing standpoint in the research and software development, but it also takes big dollars from the dentist right now to implement it into their practice. So from that standpoint, I'm thinking as more dentists are able to break down some of those barriers with the digital and with the workflow and how it's going to work, and it's going to be simpler, and hopefully they can get costs down, I think that's going to explode. And I think it's just a matter of time. I don't think that's really that far off. I think it's just a matter of getting the final little tweaks done to it. And otherwise, I think already what we're doing with implants is so amazing. I'm kind of even in 5 years, what in the world is that going to be like? That's going to be insane from that standpoint. I mean, we're already taking teeth out, putting implants in, putting dentures on the same day, doing both jaws. And it's what can we do from here? I mean, this is nuts when you sit back and look at it. And yeah, I'm a CE junkie. I love it. I do, I don't know, maybe 100 hours a year. Because again, I have a very supportive wife that allows me to go do these things. Yeah. But so when I look at that and I just look at some of just what people think about, it kind of blows my mind that people were even thinking of that caliper. It makes me almost feel dumb in a sense, because I'm like, oh my goodness, I would have never even thought of that or even contemplated trying that. So with that, I think digital is going to be huge, and there's just no way around it. Eventually everybody's going to have to get there. I think implants, I'll be really intrigued to see kind of what happens with implants in the future, because I feel like we've come such leaps and bounds from where we were in the 80s and 90s. It's how can it get better, in a sense? But those are the two areas I would like to see, just because that's where I focus a lot of my practice on. So
yeah, absolutely. And then, as far as if somebody's stuck in this path and on this journey, what are some of the last pieces of advice that you would give them, just, as you start to look forward to an exciting future in dentistry? What would you say? Because I told you the story, I get this all the time, and I have my own responses. So dentists that are 32, they'll come up to me and you can just see they're sweating. They're like, I could never do this. What would you say to them,
So interesting enough, I'm reading this book right now called The Positive Dog. Have you ever read that?
No, it sounds like a book that I would love.
So it's called The Positive Dog, and it's basically talking about you have two dogs in you. Right. You have a positive one and you have a negative one. Mm-hmm. Which one's going to win? The one you feed. Right. So if you're going to sit there and you're going to let the sweat and the emotion and the stress and everything completely overtake you, you're going to get defeated. The negative dog's going to win.
Right.
But if you choose to look at it from a different standpoint, if you choose to go down the road less traveled, it's going to be the more positive, and you're going to set your mind sight on that. Yeah. So we've noticed this in our practice. I've noticed it a lot in just reading things like that and trying to stay positive, because it's hard. I mean, it is like, yes, there's the stress of the business, and there's the stress of bills, and there's the stress of the lab, and dealing with employees sometimes, and dealing with patients sometimes. It's hard. There's no way around that. Mm-hmm. But you still got to find the bright positive spot in the day. Right. Go on a like this book. It's really funny. And it says, go on a thank you tour in the morning. Try to find 3 things to say you're thankful for, or people you can thank, because when you're thankful and you're literally saying it, you can't be stressed.
Right.
And I'm like, that's very true, because like, even though like we deal with some really difficult patients sometimes, and we just need to take a deep breath and we just say, man, I'm thankful I have patients to come see of a day. Mm-hmm. Whatever the case is, you've got to try to find the positive, because if you let the stress overtake you, it's going to bring you down hard and fast. So that would be my positive encouragement, just to say, really, really, really try to find the positive in every situation, because it's there. It's just hard to find sometimes.
Sometimes it is, man. So I am one crazy thankful that you're my friend, because it's going to be exciting to watch you in the next couple of years. I'm going to expect no pressure, but I'm expecting big things. We're all expecting big things from you. So it's really good stuff. And we're going to have you back and just talk about so many other things. But Zach, I'm sure there's a lot of kids, or I call everybody younger than me a kid, but if you're a younger dentist and you're watching this, Zach is awesome at just being able to give really practical, real advice. If people want to get a hold of you, how can we get a hold of you?
They can email me. You can look up it on drsisler.com. Go to the website and find out more about us as well. If you want to email me, my email is zachsisler@yahoo.com. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to answer questions if at all possible. If you post in the thread or post in the comments of this video, I'll try to respond to that as well, the best I can, as far as I get the notifications and stuff. So yeah, and again, anything I can do to help. Again, I've been there. Sometimes you just need somebody to kind of help you out through the tough time, and I've had those people in my life, so I'd be happy to return the favor. So.
Amen, buddy. Well, stick around just for a second, because there's so many things I want to talk to you about. But we'll say goodnight to everybody. And I know you got to run home. You got a young family. You got to be there. And I'm going to be running to a lacrosse game myself here. Watch my daughter play. But let's do this. If you're watching, hey, thank you so much for watching. We are crazy grateful that you're watching. Keep adding comments to the feeds. We are now up to 250,000 views a week and over 15,000 followers all over the world. So just so much fun. So thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed today, do me a favor, hit the share button and send Zach's story everywhere. It's so much fun to hear these stories of great success in dentistry. And if you're watching later, again, after the live feed, continue to add your questions. So until we see you next time, thank you for watching the Best Practice Show, and you guys have an awesome evening. Thank you so much.